Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, good evening, from wherever you are tuning in to joining us today here at our webinar that's now becoming a usual institution. We're very proud of it, ICLEI Africa. It's in fact our 16th webinar in our series that focuses on building sustainable cities during and after COVID-19 across the African continent. And today we're focusing on the SDGs and the localization of SDGs, a second part of a two-part series on SDG localization. The first session focused more on the South African experience and what the context is in South Africa for localization of SDGs. Today we're looking broader, at a broader African insight, and we have a fantastic lineup of speakers. It's going to be a very exciting time with you, and thank you very much for joining us. This series is also part of RISE Africa, the RISE Africa movement, which brings together academia, scientists, city practitioners, city leaders, city voices, urban dwellers, urban communities, and also thought leaders in the space of urbanization in Africa to inspire all of us to think about the urban Africa of the future, our future African city. What is it going to look like? How are we going to shape it? And what is it going to do for us in our lives? So RISE Africa is also very pleased to today be celebrating a new founded partnership with the National Research Foundation of South Africa, which is going to make sure that there's a very strong research component into all the work we do in RISE Africa, which again will benefit cities and open up the space more for the research community and our practitioners and leaders in cities to work more closely together and to speak to each other's needs and to share and listen and learn together. So thank you also to the National Research Foundation for partnering with ICLEI and under the RISE Africa program and to help us engage our communities more on research. So without further ado, we want to get on with a very full-packed program, and the SDG focus is particularly important as we are about to enter the UN decade of action, of implementation and action for the SDGs. We know in sub-Saharan Africa, it is reported that only 18 of 44 countries will definitely not even reach halfway of the SDG targets by 2030. We can still change it. We have a decade of action and inspiration and wonderful leaders at the local level. It's important that the SDGs are localized and contextualized within the local realities so that our cities and our towns and our regions can all support to their fullest ability to meeting these global goals that are so important for the very survival of people and planet, and also for the quality of life of our urban dwellers. And we're rapidly urbanizing in Africa, as we know. So with this decade in mind, with the SDGs where they are in Africa, yes, it's time to talk to cities, to listen to cities, for cities to be heard and for cities to come to the table and also engage in localization of SDGs. So I'm looking forward to today. I hope you will join us for the 2 hours that's ahead of us. And I'm now handing over as Regional Director of ICLEI Africa to my very dear colleague, Nachi Majoe, who is a Senior Professional Officer focusing on many things in our office, amongst others, leading our Sustainable Development Goals work, our SDG localization program. Nachi, the floor is yours, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Kobe. Good day, everyone. My name is Nachi Maje, and I'm a Manager for Strategic Alliances and also a Senior Professional Officer at ICLEI Africa. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the Voices of African Cities in the Localization of the SDGs webinar, which is hosted by RISE Africa, the National Research Foundation, and ICLEI Africa. This is the second webinar in a two-part series on localizing the SDGs. Before I begin, I would like to remind you of our webinar protocols. Please note that the webinar is being recorded, and therefore by participating, you are consenting to be recorded. We have participants from across the continent and would really like to hear your voice. So we welcome and encourage active discussions in our chat box throughout the presentations. And the panelists will also be available to respond directly to your questions, which you can find the option at the bottom of your screen. The value of the chat box is that you're able to like other people's questions. So if you have a question that's similar to, if you see a question that's similar to what you'd also like to ask, please like it and it will make sure that it moves to the top. In that way, your question stands a better chance of being asked. I would now like to mention that as part of the Road to Rise Africa 2021, there are a number of webinars that will be taking place. And first, just to mention that Rise Africa brings together thinkers, doers, and enablers, and promotes art, creative expression, and other ways of knowing to inspire action for sustainable cities. So each month we'll be focusing on a particular webinar, with August having been the SDG localization month. And the next webinar in September will be on future African cities. And as you can see on your screen, for the rest of the year, there's quite a number of webinars that you participate in. So later on, we'll also be providing more information about the Future African Cities webinar, which we strongly encourage you to register for. And details about how to register will be made available in the chat box. As you would have seen in the invitation, as well as on the website, that we have an excellent list of speakers from across the continent, and their profiles have also been made available. So in introducing the speakers, I will not necessarily go through all of their profiles. They're all very, very impressive. So I encourage you to just keep an eye out in the chat box where the profiles will be provided and be read. With that said, I would now like to invite our first speaker, who will be providing us with welcoming remarks. And this is Dr. Andrew Kaniki, and he is the Executive Director of Knowledge Advancement and Support at the NRF. Over to you, Dr. Kaniki.
Thank you very much, Nachi, and thanks very much for the earlier remarks by Kobe. It's a privilege to be at this particular webinar and excited to participate. I have a very short and thankful job of just saying welcome and look forward to the discussion. One of the critical parts of the times that we face today, especially in the cities and everywhere else, is of course in terms of providing service delivery in many of our cities. I, as indicated in my CV, I work for the National Research Foundation, which is a funding agency. It funds researchers at universities and provides student support, and of course at research institutes. One of our very core issues that we are trying to drive and embedded into our own Vision 2030 and of course the Strategy 2025 is to drive and support the national development goals of the country of South Africa. Embedded in that is of course the SDGs, and we know that SDGs are complex and of course multifaceted and requires a variety of areas and fields in terms of expertise. So it's critical for us to share the ideas, whether they are South African lessons and or other African countries, to see how we can actually achieve the SDGs. As indicated earlier by Kobe, if we leave it to each one of us to do what we can. Of course, we do understand that all of us and not all the countries will actually achieve everything that we anticipate by 2030. However, I think we will hasten the process by sharing these experiences. So the situation we are in, and of course the idea of this kind of webinar is of course exchanging the ideas and in terms of what are the experiences that we are facing. We do understand, in fact, I think as I indicated earlier, that the major part of what our cities are facing is service delivery. Whether you're in South Africa or in Kenya or in Mali, the idea of providing water, providing fresh water, and providing housing, in reducing poverty are the kinds of things that we face. To understand and learn how others are doing it is exactly what we need to be doing. In order for us to even interact with other parts of the world, is essentially for us, firstly, in South Africa and in Africa and within our regions, to share our ideas. So the idea in this kind of conversation is, what is it that we can learn from one another? Importantly, from agencies like mine, it's how do we fund research that will inform the kind of, or assist to resolve the kinds of problems that we face. We do know, and we have come to accept, that most of the complex problems that we face today require complex solutions, and which must be shared solutions. It is impossible for one researcher alone, from one institution alone, to actually find all the solutions that we have come to accept that unless we provide the solutions from the physicists, from mathematicians, from social workers, from sociologists and economists across the continent, that we can actually find solutions. So it's my pleasure to be part of this particular conversation and look forward to the exchanges from people from a variety of expertise that in fact will assist us to find the solutions that we need. Importantly, within the cities that we actually live in, how do we make sure that we have safe drinking water, that we have proper housing, that we have proper schools? We have just in the middle of the COVID pandemic right now. We all face the same kinds of situations. It doesn't choose whether you are rich or poor, but unless we find all the solutions, whether they're health or medical. So I'm delighted that we are part of this particular conversation, and we hope that you will put together some of the ideas and solutions that we, as funding agencies, as government, can provide and put some resources to actually find the solution. So with those few words, thank you very much for the opportunity, and we look forward to this particular conversation. Thanks once again, Nachi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaniki, for those powerful opening words. And as you said, really, we are faced by complex problems that require collective effort. And as we hear from the different speakers today and the participants, we hope we'll be able to collectively start to think about possible solutions that we can find as a collective. I'd like to now welcome our next speaker, Mr. Kofi Kankem, who is the chairperson of the African Regional Mechanism of NGOs. And it's also a structure that as Italy Africa, we sit on and represent the voice of local governments, of subnational governments. Over to you, Mr. Kofi Kankem.
Thank you very much, Nachi. And greetings to all the distinguished panel members and the participants. Just a quick one. Nachi, currently, our mechanism is known as the Africa Regional Mechanism for Major Groups and Other Stakeholders. And I'm making a presentation on this, and then also in connection with the just ended 2020 HLPF and VNR reports from Africa. The Africa Regional Mechanism of the Major Groups, which is formerly known as the Africa Regional Civil Society Engagement Mechanism, was officially launched in February 2020 at the 6th session of the Africa Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. And basically, this is an independent mechanism that facilitates the participation of major groups and other stakeholders and civil society organizations based in Africa. It is actually expected to reach out to all the civil society organizations and major groups and other stakeholders in all the 55 African countries, basically to share information with them on regional and global policy debates and processes on sustainable development, promote civil society consultation and dialogue, support national and regional advocacy, and facilitate the participation of diverse range of civil society organizations and major groups. This mechanism basically is constituted a representation of about of 17 members, which are drawn out from all the major groups, and also it has other representatives from all the national platforms championing the SDGs. Basically, at the just ended HLP, during the VNR reports, we have about 15 African countries which made the report, which included Benin, Burundi, the likes of Gambia, Kenya, Zambia, among others. And just a quick one. Basically, during the presentation of the VNRs, what we did observe, or as part of the success stories, we realized that there was improvement in health, education, service provision, also transport and ICT infrastructure was also being improved on the continent. But among the challenges that we drew during that time was that COVID-19 has actually inflicted immense damages to a lot of African economies, especially those that depend on tourism and exports. There's also significant proportion of the population still living under the poverty line and income inequality. And then one significant and important thing that we also recognized during that time was that many of the African countries lack the capacity to collect and analyze statistical data to inform the implementation of the SDGs. And then also, we realized that one of the key observations that the just ended HLPF, the participation actually increased to about 90,000 plus. We don't know whether it was due to the visual meetings or whatever, but one of the most important general observation was that the VNR reports, that is the voluntary national reports that were made at that place, were mostly documents that were presented from governments, not, with the non-state actors actually having limited contribution to those documents. And we realized that the capacity of the non-state actors were extremely low in contributing to that development of the VNR reports. And we have decided as a group to concentrate on building the capacity of major groups on the continent to support in the development of VNR reports and other reports on SDGs on the continent. And also we realized the shrinking spaces of the major groups on the continent. And then we've decided to also advocate for increased spaces of the major groups. And this is just, basically our next steps. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kofi, for sharing those inputs. And I think it's very interesting that you provided feedback in terms of what have been some of the successes and challenges, particularly looking at the shrinking space of non-state actors, the role that they play in the process. And with local government, with local and subnational governments being represented in the mechanism, it's a good opportunity to ensure that the voice of cities is certainly heard. And with that said, I'd like to now invite participants to please participate in our live poll by answering this question. So after having heard Kofi's presentation, would like to know, to what extent have you been involved in your country's voluntary national review before? Have you been fully involved? Was your involvement minimal, or you were not involved at all, or you didn't know anything about the VNR process? So if you can just choose the options, it would be interesting to see what has been your involvement in this process. So far, in terms of the results, majority of people are saying they didn't know about the VNR. So we'll give it just a few more seconds to see what the response is. So it seems very much that majority of people are saying that they did not know about the VNR. So this points, I think, to what Kofi had mentioned in terms of the need to build capacity and raise awareness about the various processes that are involved in the SDGs, including monitoring, evaluation, as well as reporting. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating in that poll. I'd like now to invite our next speaker, and we'll now be joined by Dr. Michael Onoko, and he will be sharing some perspectives in terms of lessons learned from the MISTRA New Urban Agenda and SDGs Comparative Project in Kisumu in Kenya. Over to you, Dr. Onoko.
Thank you so much, Nachi. As you've heard, my name is Dr. Michael Oloko. Currently, I'm the Deputy Director in charge of Scientific Research at Kisumu Local Interaction Platform. And here I'm leading the team from Kisumu, presenting lessons learned from the MISTRA Urban Futures New Urban Agenda and SDG Comparative Project. Other people involved in this project and who are also here with us is Mr. Stephen Ojiambo from the National SDG Coordination Unit. And also we have Ms. Wambogo from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. And we have Mr. Tom Ogola from the County Government of Kisumu. The background of this particular project, the project is implemented through Kisumu Local Interaction Platform as part of MISTRA Urban Futures International Research Network and involved 7 cities distributed across 4 continents of the world. The project is designed to monitor and analyze implementation processes of the urban agenda, that is goal number 11, within the cities involved. It is guided by transdisciplinary co-production of knowledge, and here there is involvement of the local government officials as well as the academia and other stakeholders. Actual work involved working with the municipalities, facilitation of cross-city learning, comparison and interaction among the cities involved. Critical events that were organized, 3 international conferences. There is participation in the high-level, UN high-level political forums, and just recently, the World Urban Forum. I now focus on the implementation process in Kenya. We noted that in Kenya, there is strong engagement of this process at the national level compared to what is happening at the county and the city level. We also noted that data is many times collected at the local level, but when it comes to aggregation and analysis, it is normally done at the county, regional, and national level. Focusing on the reporting scale, we do realize that very little reporting or none is done at the city level. We also noted that to report the city scale, more work is required, especially in some level of multi-level collaboration. We also noted that there is a strong coordination unit at the national level, and the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics is the government agency charged with the responsibility of collecting and working on this data. Next. Next. Now, key lessons are drawn from this project. We noted that on delimitation of the urban boundaries and non-disaggregation of data, as you can see in the diagram that is given, if you look at the urban boundary and the city boundary, they are not aligned, and this affects the reporting, especially when you're focusing on urban characteristics. There is that risk of not capturing the urban information more accurately. When it comes to cascading the SDG implementation to the city level, we also did realize that there is need of having qualified disaggregated data at the city level, which is not normally the reporting level. Therefore, the role of the city board and the role of the city board in managing the city affairs sometimes gets into conflict with other government agencies whose mandates overlaps the city area. Next. Here we see overlapping institutional mandates. As you can see in the diagram, there is the county government whose mandate overlaps that of the city. So we focus on institutional mandates not consistent with the city boundaries. And we also noted that, especially when dealing with urban agenda, SDG number 11, and focusing on the urban area, there is no single institution that is charged with the responsibility of looking at issues of the urban area. Therefore, information depicting urban characteristics may not be captured accurately in many cases here. Next. Therefore, we stress the importance of multi-level collaboration and governance. And looking at Kenya, we look at the devolved governance system. We have the county government and the national government, which need to work together. We also realize that there are devolved functions and non-devolved functions. Devolved functions are expected to be implemented at the county level, non-devolved still implemented at the national level. And this causes some conflict, and therefore there is need to synchronize these two functions and harmonize them more so at the city level. We also noted that the regional government agencies like the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics also need to work together with the city board to focus on urban issues that are within the city boundaries. And in this multi-level collaboration, there is possibilities of aiding data collection and application of this particular information, especially for planning within the city area. Next. Actions to meet the SDG by 2030. We've noted the progress that the government has made. And one of the key issues that was coming out was the mainstreaming of the SDG within the development plans. For example, the county integrated development plans. And these are recognized documents that are within the constitution. So this was one of the best practices that came out from Kenya, and that could be learned by other cities from this project. There is also need of strengthening capacity building of the county staff as well as the city staff, and this is done by the coordination unit from the national level. And also prioritization of critical areas for increased budget. We see the government priorities as stipulated with, in the Big Four agenda, giving focus to some specific areas. And therefore, findings from this project that can be shared by other cities for consideration. One is the project's innovation that came as a result of cities' peer-to-peer pairing and learning based on the strong best practices from the 7 cities and also the weak areas. So therefore, the cities were able to learn from each other. We also noted a very good practice from Cape Town that is embedding researchers within the city authorities with specific mandate and time period. This is an opportunity where the university staff, postdoctoral fellows can contribute to the implementation of the SDGs. And then also facilitation of multi-level collaboration and working relationship. This was also one thing that was organized by this project in bringing together the SDG National Coordination Unit and the unit at the county level and even the city level to discuss some of these challenging issues, and some of which we had solutions. There is also something that was learned from Kisumu City that is anchoring these processes on legally recognized and functional instruments. We have the development plans that are embedded in the Kenyan Constitution and documents that are being implemented by the government, and therefore mainstreaming the SDGs and the new urban agenda issues within these recognized documents is in a way securing some level of budget for the implementation of these processes. And another good practice from Shimla, India, was that using external monitoring and evaluation processes to oversee the implementation process. This was very important for Kenya that uses internal processes for monitoring and evaluation. Moving forward, COVID-19 is likely to affect these processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oloko, for those insightful lessons. And I think you raised quite a number of critical lessons that the other cities can certainly learn from. I think in terms of the lack of reporting at a city level, that is something that is experienced across the continent and even beyond, in terms of there being a lack of available data. So working with the respective National Bureau of Statistics is very important, and very interesting and absolutely correct in terms of the importance of multi-level governance. So in achieving the SDGs, it's not something that can be done by one level of government, but certainly requires all levels of government to be involved and to play a very clear role and ensure that there is clarity and understanding in terms of mandates and functions between subnational governments and national governments. So thank you very much for sharing that presentation. And now would also just hear more lessons, this time from Accra Metropolitan Assembly. And we are joined by Mr. Moses Kwashi, and he is the Chief Investment and Business Development Officer in the Office of the Mayor. Over to you, sir.
Yes, good afternoon, Nanji. Thank you very much, Nanji. Good afternoon to fellow panelists, and good afternoon to colleagues from across the world. My name is Moses Kwashi, and I represent the Accra Metropolitan Assembly. The Accra Metropolitan Assembly, by way of brief, is the biggest and by far the oldest metropolitan assembly in Ghana. It is a city that hosts major government infrastructure. It is a commercial city with a population of about 2.1 million as of 2017. We also have a transient population of about 3 million traveling into the main central business district to do business on a daily basis. So it is a very busy area. Now, Accra, together with the government of Ghana, has always been at the forefront of the advocacy for SDG. This advocacy were informed by many improvements and achievements that were recorded under the Millennium Development Goals, for which Accra participated, and that resulted in significant reduction in poverty. The SDG came in as a very comprehensive framework of development, and the model is very attractive to most African cities simply because it permits for a comprehensive review and for development of policies that brings about broad-based development. The implementation of the SDG, as we all know, were based on the 17 goals which were advanced by all nations at all countries at United Nations. And these 17 goals obviously are the global agenda. Now, what cities do is to try and localize this agenda so that it becomes more meaningful. So by localization of SDG agenda, the city of Accra is trying to align SDGs and make it more relevant to the needs and aspirations of the residents of Accra. It also means that we are able to build more integrated, inclusive, and sustained development. We believe that it's a process which must be followed with some level of integrity. Next slide, please. Now, to ensure that there's integrity to the process, obviously, there are certain key tenets that the city of Accra and most cities abide by. One of it, the most important and key element, is that there's a need to provide sensitization and engagement of local actors. Obviously, if we are going to localize the SDG goals, we need to have broad consultation with all groups of persons that are relevant to that discussion. And by involving local actors, we create the awareness and the participation that is needed in order to drive its success. It also underpins that we create a mechanism for accountability, where we are able to show very clearly what we are doing as a city on SDG, what progress has been made, and then also what are the challenges. It is also depends on planning, participatory planning and service delivery. Obviously, I mean, SDG is all about delivery, and we need to deliver development in broad areas. It also ensures that there is the investment into the local economy that the SDG principles of leaving no one behind. One thing that SDG has also taught us is that there is a need to build partnerships because SDG is complex, as has always been noted. And therefore, it is very important that we as a city create those partnerships that helps for a successful delivery. Now, that partnership obviously results in consultation with different stakeholders, many other stakeholders, to ensure that the principles of inclusiveness and participatory democracy governance is achieved. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. So let me share with you Accra's experience. As indicated earlier, Accra has always been Accra has always been an advocate for SDGs. Obviously, our government had been part of SDG at a very high level, with the president of Ghana playing a very significant role at the UN level. Okay. Sorry, 1 minute, please. Back, please. Okay. The slide has gone ahead. Can you come back a bit? Can you go back, please? Oh. Okay. Okay. No, can you go forward, please? Next page. Okay. Now, Accra, in order to ensure that Accra abides fully with the requirement of the SDG, Accra did the innovative thing of ensuring that it aligned its SDG goals with its medium-term development framework. Now, the medium-term development framework obviously, allows us as a city to set what we want to achieve in the future based upon key national economic priorities. So what Accra did was that Accra embedded SDG into its development framework so that by achieving the objective of those development framework, Accra at the same time is achieving the SDG goals. The medium-term aspirations and policies, which are the basis for our economic planning, was an element that is usually detected by the National Development Planning Commission, and we as a city then pick up the conversation with all local actors in order to frame our sub-goals that will guide the activities of the city. Now, with this approach, every single budgetary line items that it is put within the city budget is aligned to an SDG goal. So at the end of every budget cycle, it is possible to indicate how much Accra has dedicated to its SDG goal. Now, we've also developed partnerships to ensure that there is good governance, transparency, and accountability. Now, the partnership that we developed with New York led to Accra declaring its support for conducting voluntary local review. It is also led to support from the UNECA, partnering Accra to conduct its first local voluntary review. And the review, was conducted in order for us to have an assessment about what Accra had been able to achieve in terms of its SDG goals. It is a very comprehensive exercise that involves many and multiple stakeholders at different levels, including academia, including academia groups, including traditional authorities, including CSOs, including different market associations. Some of the key stakeholders of the governance structure of the Assembly that helps to perform monitoring of the SDG implementations are the traditional authority. We have the local market associations, we have government appointees who are appointed to the Assembly, and then we also have various committees that serves the interest of the residents of Accra on the city board. In order to further accountability on the SDG, the Mayor of Accra is required by law to present to the Assembly his annual address showing what activities were done and how those activities had led to SDG implementations. Accra has further shown transparency and commitments to proper governance by publishing its first voluntary local review in 2019. This document is a document, obviously, that allows us to be accountable to our people in terms of how we have mainstreamed the SDG goals into our local objectives and have managed to achieve those objectives. Now, I think my time is up, but before I do that, I just want to highlight some of the flagship programs that the cities has done. Remember, the city works closely with government, so there are many other activities at the level of central government that also helps to ensure that SDG goals are attained at the level of the city. Now we're talking about, we have sustainable greening and beautification initiatives. We have energy efficiencies in public buildings. We're talking about redevelopment of local markets to give them more resilience and ensure that there is support for the informal economy, which is a key driver of poverty reductions and provision of jobs in Accra. We're talking about tree planting. We're talking about construction of waste treatment plants in partnership with private sector for waste collection, recycling, reuse. We're talking about improving mobility in Accra through an effective transport action plan. We're talking about road safety campaigns. We're talking about program to improve ease of doing business, which was done in collaboration with the Ministry of Trade and Industry. We are talking about launching several platforms on women empowerment and to encourage inclusiveness. We are also talking about government activities that are undertaken at the level of the cities, which includes youth employment, which includes planting for food and industries, which include one district, one factory. Let me end by saying that the local review has been very helpful because it has allowed us to be able to identify areas that we haven't done so well. It also allowed us to see our strengths. Obviously, data had been identified as one key area, especially in terms of the disaggregation of data that needs to be captured at the level of the city so that we can effectively measure our SDG improvements. On that note, I'd like to thank you for hearing me out. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kwashi, for that very, very good presentation and sharing very practical examples of what Accra has been able to achieve. And I think one of the key highlights, and you mentioned many things, including the list of some of the achievements as well as the challenges that you faced, but certainly the political buy-in that you mentioned with regards to the mayor having to report in terms of the progress for the SDGs and alignment to the budget process. So ensuring that the SDGs do not end just on paper, but that they're actually aligned to actual funding or to the city's budgeting process. And definitely the importance of the whole of society approach, the fact that you work with various stakeholders and ensuring that you truly do not leave anyone behind, and the importance of partnerships. I mean, there is an SDG, SDG 17 specifically on partnerships, and that without working with various partners from the private sector, from the communities as well, it's not possible to be able to achieve the SDGs, and that they have to be mainstreamed and contextualized within the planning processes and policies and plans of cities in order for the SDG programs and projects to be implemented. So thank you very much for that presentation. And I've seen the chat and the Q&A has been very, very active. And thank you very much for putting in your questions in there. I've seen people also exchanging contact details and requesting additional information. So as mentioned, we will be taking questions now. And there are quite a number of questions that have been put forward. So we'll not be able to reach all of them, but we have been able to group them or categorize them based on the most popular questions that have been asked. So I'm now going to pose the questions to our panelists, and I will ask all of them. So if I can just request the panelists to take note of the questions that are directed at you, and then if we can spend about just 1 minute responding to those questions. So the first question is to Dr. Kaniki, and the question is that if you can please share some insights on how we might secure increased funding to fast track the implementation of projects to achieve the SDGs in African cities. So that is to you, Dr. Kaniki. And then the second question is to Dr. Michael Oloko. And the question is that if you can just share one example or tip in terms of strengthening multi-level governance. And you did share quite a few in this, but it's been a very important question in terms of how can multi-level governance be strengthened. And then the last question, and this is to Moses, in terms of what are the most important partnerships that you have been able to secure in order to ensure that no one is left behind. So if you can please just share your thoughts on that. So I will then hand over to Dr. Kaniki, and then to Dr. Oloko, and then to Mr. Moses Kwashi in that order. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nashi. I indicated that perhaps today what we have come to realize, all of us, many of us, let me put it, is the fact that most of these problems are quite similar. Whether you're dealing with the developed countries or other countries, we have to come together. One of the things that we are doing, and I'm sure that when Professor Stephanie Barton talks about the Future Earth Africa office, in terms of what we are trying to do, it's an attempt to try and pull together resources to attach and work with these particular problems. So the question about how do we increase funding, most of the countries, and I was glad to see that Mr. Kwashi talked about how the SDGs are embedded in the national development plans. In South Africa, the SDGs are embedded in the national development plans. With our own organization, the SDGs are, so what we're all trying to do, and I think what is important is to observe where are the resources, what kind of things that we can do in order to drive the SDGs, in order to motivate for that, and resources are there. I know that we can never have all the resources, but indeed, organizations like Future Earth, organizations like the Belmont Forum, independent bodies like CEDA and so on are all coming up to say, let's try and put some resources in there. What we can do, even in this kind of conversation we're having, is put together and say, this is a problem we want to work together. Who do we go to and say to ourselves, how do we work around this together? In African, the African agencies, we now got, the various funding agencies that have come together. And perhaps my colleagues, Michael and Tabo at some point may point this out. So there's an opportunity to say, how do we share these resources? As I said, we can never have enough, but I'm sure as we go, because we all recognize the problems of the SDGs, that we can actually band together and and work on these problems. I'm sure that, as I said, Professor Burton may touch on some of the initiatives that Future Earth Africa is trying to deal with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Aniki. If you can then get Dr. Michael Oloko and then immediately followed by Ms. DeMoses Kwashi.
Thank you so much, Nachi, and the question. I want to say that multi-level collaboration is very, very critical when it comes to the implementation of SDG. And this we realized when we first had an SDG project just in 2015 to test acceptability and relevance of some of the targets and indicators of SDG number 11. And the project was based in Kisumu City. And what we did realize that we skimmed through the necessary information in terms of the data that we require. And this we were doing at the city level. What we realized is that there are some information that we noted that were present, had been collected, but this information was not available at the city level. And therefore, we started asking where we could get this information. And we noted that with the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, that is the national government agency based in Nairobi, which carries out quite a lot of, has a lot of data and is the mandated institution to collect and report on this information, had this particular information. So we started asking, how do we bring the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics on board so that we can discuss some of these issues? Because it was not clear, as I've reported, that the reporting scale in Kenya does not focus on the city level, but rather focuses on the county level and national and county level, where some towns are lucky to have their city boundaries aligned to their county boundaries. But in Kisumu is a bit different. So we did bring Kenya National Bureau of Statistics on board to discuss this question. And then we called upon them into a discussion to Kisumu. And that is why in this project, we had Lea Wambugu, who is also is part of this particular project. So is responding to some of these issues that might help in strengthening this multi-level collaboration. So in the co-production approach, co-production research approach, whereby we use the academia, we use the practitioners, government officials, and even community level, community members, we bring them together into a discussion. So by even the co-production approach, that is the research approach that is supported very much strongly by the Ministry of Urban Futures, in a way, indirectly achieves this multi-level coordination and collaboration and discussion, and therefore quite a number of issues can be discussed in this particular program. And in this project, we also have a representative from the National SDG Coordination Unit, Stephen Ojambo, and is part of this particular presentation. And I am a researcher. So in this kind of combination itself, indirectly, there is some sort of multi-level collaboration. And what we did realize is that we only needed to do some little request to the national office so that the data that was collected from the ground can be brought back. There is national census that is done every 10 years. And therefore, the population for the city does not come out within its boundaries, but it comes out at the county level and at the sub-county level. But the city boundaries here has 2 sub-counties and a portion of another sub-county. So that is why the reporting becomes a little difficult. But in coordination with the national office, they are able to collect all these clusters and bring out the information for planning purposes at the city level. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Nachi.
And thank you very much, Dr. Oloko. And over to you then, Moses.
Thank you very much, Nachi. I think I'm answering what measures are we taking to ensure we leave no one behind. Before I do that, I'd like to agree with Michael Oloko that definitely, yes, data is a big issue at the city level. Fortunately for us, there are a lot of data sitting at many institutions that with the right collaborations, the cities will be able to access those data in order to be able to conduct proper reporting of their SDG agenda. So that is an engagement that cities need to look at more critically and align with those institutions in order to ensure that they are getting the right data to report. In terms of leaving no one behind, obviously our voluntary local review, which we conducted, clearly identified all the vulnerable groups. It identified vulnerable groups before the COVID-19 pandemic ensued. And it was very, very clear that for those groups, there is a need to have more targeted, programs to ensure that they are empowered to become mainstream, to become part of the mainstream economy. Obviously, most vulnerable groups tends to be either within the disabled group, people living in very deprived cities, those with very little access to education, and those with very little means of having access to employment. Fortunately for us, this discovery allowed us to target our support to those vulnerable groups during the COVID era in order to limit the impact of hunger and starvation among those groups. It's also informing the work we are doing at the moment, which is being conducted by the COVID Recovery Economic Management Team. And that management team, that committee is sitting to look at the structure of our society, the structure of our economy. We're looking again at our economic and urban resilient drivers. And we want to see how best we'll be able to drive the vulnerable groups into those particular skilled areas where they can then become very critical actors of the economy, be able to produce and impact and show resilience even in the face of the next pandemic. So yes, we have conducted that extensive review, and it's going to inform a lot of work that we'll be doing in future regarding how to reduce poverty, how to ensure that there is relevant education, skills acquisition, there is targeted programs of well-being, and then also there are targeted programs to ensure that they acquire the required jobs and employment opportunities. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to the participants for their questions, as well as to the panelists for the responses. And please do continue sharing in the Q&A and the chat box. And we've now really heard a lot about the policy landscape that's required to be in place in order for the SDGs to be localized, what national government needs to do, what subnational governments need to do in terms of having the correct legislative framework and supportive plans in place, as well as structures and processes that support this. And now we'll be moving on to more implementation with regards to implementing programs and projects that will ensure that the SDGs are localized. And also, more than anything, that people's lives are changed on the ground. So for this second segment, we're going to start with Ms. Vina Mandi Nyanya from Madagascar, and she will be sharing the implementation of the SDGs programs and projects through the SDG labs. Over to you, Rina.
Thank you, Nachi, and good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Rina. I'm from Madagascar. I'm part of team member of Madagascar Forest Company, small organization in the country, disciplinary teams, researchers and professionals to address the environmental challenges that the planet is facing nowadays. Currently, we are hosting free SDG labs, but today I'm going to talk about one lab, which is the citizen implication for the clean seaside city towards sustainable tourism in the country. Before I start, I would like to introduce Madagascar context and sustainable development goals. The country ratified the Rio Convention in 1995, but only has a proper institution who is in charge of sustainable development at the Ministry of Environment on 2015. It is very young institution and many challenges, especially the engagement of diverse sectors. Next slide, please. Next, please. Hello. Next, yeah. Now I'm going to talk the background of the project. Can you get back to the previous one, please? The project has been developed in the eastern coastal area of Madagascar in Full Point municipalities, which is 400 kilometers from the capital. This city is very popular in terms of domestic tourist destination. And I can say that the tourism is one of the local economic pillars during these years. However, this city also is dealing with many challenges due to the rapid growth of the activities and also the rapid growth of the cities. Like there is no proper management plan for the tourism, and there are big environmental concerns, like for the coral reef, for example, there is no waste management. So this project aims to tackle one of these challenges, which is the waste management. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so this lab suggests to address some challenges linked with tourism activity in the city. So our first idea is to develop the waste management tools, which will involve all stakeholders into the process. But also the project will contribute in achieving the sustainable development goals targets listed below, like target 8, target 10, target 11, 14, 15, and 17. Next slide, please. The project is developed into two phases. The first phase is the project startup, and the second phase is the project scaling up. During the project startup, we've been discussing with all local stakeholders to identify the problems linked with the tourism and the waste. And we have also discussed with them the solution that needs to be established. And we already implement some solutions. And we have shared some results with stakeholders. Next slide, please. The Scaling Up project, during this second phase, we intend to expand our project impact, not only in Full Point City, but also in other similar areas in the country. And we would like to achieve other countries in Africa based on the 4 dimensions that I'm showing to you here: the functionality scaling up, quantitative scaling up, political scaling up, and organizational scaling up. We are developing our focus for 5 years, and the project scaling up project has been started this year. Next slide, please. Next slide. During the 1.5 year, these are the key achievements of the SDG labs. We managed to gather all stakeholders to discuss all issues linked with tourism and waste management in the area. We managed also to gather them to discuss the solution and to define the implementation plan in the area. And currently, at the municipality level, there is already a decree on waste management that have been adopted last year. We also managed to develop several supports to promote waste management locally and nationally. We developed like digital distance capacity buildings through a video that we have been developed during this project. And the most importantly, we covered all stakeholders to join our initiative. Especially, we reached out to the government through the Ministry of Environment and Sustainable Development to discuss how to implement the project and how to expand the result of our project to other cities in the countries. And we still continuing to run our lobbying to other entities like private entities and society civils. Next slide, please. However, the project is dealing with several issues such as political transitions. For our case, for example, when a new mayor was appointed in January, it was hard to meet, to discuss with him and to try to meet the project goals and the new mayor's priority. I think that it is very usual happening in a country like Madagascar that the newly elected leader has their program and sometimes they underestimate the ongoing program. So without intense lobbying and support from our stakeholders, it could be a threat to the project progress. Like in all parts of the world, COVID-19 also has impacted the project as well. Since travel has been banned, for example, the team has to change the plan over time. However, it has also been an opportunity to explore an innovative way to achieve our initial goals. Next slide, please. So what lesson I would like to share today when we would like to engage stakeholders in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Like my colleague said, it is important to engage stakeholders from the initial stage of the project. And from our project, we are convinced that establishing strong public institutional supports is a key to achieve the goals. It is also important to extend our collaboration with private and professional entities. And I could say also that behavior change is the most toughest part when we are working around sustainable development. So we are thinking that it couldn't go alone. And here, I would like to emphasize that it should rhyme with strong partnerships and collaborations. Therefore, we need strong institutional support in these aspects. Next slide. So thank you to the NRF and the Future Earth for the generous supports. And thank you for all team involved in this project. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rina, for sharing that very, very interesting project. I think it clearly demonstrates that the SDGs are truly connected. So by being able to achieve one, you can achieve the others as well. So the interconnectedness between the SDGs is very important to take into consideration and not to treat them in isolation. And active participation of citizens also being clearly demonstrated that citizens play a very important role in being able to support cities to deliver on some of its mandates, in this case, waste management, which then contributes to tourism. So we'll now then move on to our next speaker while on the discussion about the implementation of projects and programs on the ground. And this is another SDG lab example. And joining us is Professor Engineer Baino Mugisha, and he's an associate professor and chair of computer science at Makerere University in Kampala. Over to you, Professor.
Thank you so much, Nashi. Good afternoon, fellow panelists, and good afternoon, the participants. My name is Engineer Baino Mugisha from Makerere University in Kampala, Uganda. I would like to share our experience on trying to build local technologies to support the implementation of SDGs for Uganda, specifically for our Kampala city, which is focused on air pollution, which is an important aspect of SDG 3, which has a target of by 2030 to substantially reduce the number of deaths and illnesses from hazardous chemicals and air, water and soil pollution and contamination. This is also a key aspect of SDG 11 on sustainable cities and communities, which has a target of by 2030 to reduce the advanced per capita environmental impact of cities, including by paying special attention to air quality and municipal and other waste management, which my fellow panelist Rina has just talked about. Yeah, so why is air pollution important for Africa, specifically for African cities? We know that air pollution has high negative impacts on our health. And the recent statistics from the World Health Organization indicate that over 7 million people die every year from exposure to indoor and outdoor air pollution. Unfortunately, the majority of these are happening in low-income countries, which by far and large in the sub-Saharan Africa. So this is an important aspect of cities as we think about development. Next slide. Unfortunately, for many African cities, as you can see in the global map there, of the presence of air quality monitoring across the world, we can see that Africa is largely unmonitored. And most importantly, African cities, there's lack of data on air quality. As you can see in the zoom on the next slide, we see that there's little presence of air quality monitoring in Africa. There's a bit of activity in the southern part of the continent, but when you look at the rest of the continent, you see that there is less activity in actually quantifying the magnitude of air pollution. Next slide. And this motivated our research into this aspect, in that if we cannot measure the pollution, then we cannot effectively manage it. And this presented an interesting case study where a local university based in Uganda can work with the city municipality within the same city and the community members to tackle this problem. Next slide. So we started this research initiative, which has been supported by NRF and our other funders, to do a pilot on building local technologies that engages local citizens, engages the city municipalities, the university researchers, to come together and address a problem that is the key part of SDGs. So in brief, Air Codes, a research initiative that I lead, we build low-cost air quality monitors that we deploy in Kampala and other cities in Uganda to measure air pollution in real time. And we have deployed over 80 monitors so far, and we get about 27 million records of data every year, which gives us the opportunity to measure the pollution. And most importantly, the part of our work is that we look at what's available locally to build the technologies. As you can see in the picture there, we know that in our Kampala city and many other African cities, motorbikes are common use of transportation. And one of the opportunities that we saw was, can we be able to build a technology that can be mounted on these local devices, these local motorbikes, and can monitor air quality when these riders are doing their work. And that's an example in the picture there of the monitor deployed on a motorbike. So we work with these border riders to contribute to solutions for addressing the challenges within our city here in Kampala. Next slide, please. So in brief, this is what we do. We monitor air pollution. We build technologies to analyze this, data analytics tools, including data science tools and artificial intelligence. And then we work with the different stakeholders to inform the public to raise awareness. Next slide. And this is an overview. For those who might not be familiar with Uganda, the picture there shows the map of Uganda. And for over the period of about 3 years, we've been able to install about 80 monitors across the country. So Kampala city is in the area where there's a high concentration of the monitors next to Lake Victoria. And each of these monitors, importantly, is that they are installed in the premises of the community members. So we go to the community members and sensitize them about the importance of monitoring air quality, and they give us access to their premises where we install these devices and then provide this information back to them. And some of the hosts of our devices are empowered on actually educating other community members on the importance of air quality and what they can do in their communities to minimize our exposure to air pollution, but also to reduce on the activities that generate air pollution. Next slide, please. And here is an example of the work that we are doing, how what we are doing feeds into policy making and decision making with the government. In the picture there is a sample analytics platform that we built for Kampala Capital City Authority. where they can get in and actually see how different areas of the city are performing in regarding to air quality, and this can inform decision making on which areas need urgent attention, or which areas are exceeding the recommended guidelines of, let's say, WHO. For instance, WHO recommends that particulate matter 2.5 should not exceed 25 micrograms per cubic meter on average over 24 hours. So they can easily have an insight using the data to see which areas might need an urgent attention, but also what they might need to do to improve, air quality across the city. And we also have built a mobile app that we made available for the public. And our data has also been feeding into the formulation of the national air quality standards. Next slide, please. Our other key stakeholder are schools. Some of the monitors are installed in the schools. Here is a picture, for instance, of one of the schools, the monitor installed. And what you can see in the picture there is that the children in the school have been engaged, and they've actually drawn a picture in their school on what are the causes of emissions in the city, and also proudly associating with Makerere University for working with them to address this problem in their society. The final slide, please. Yeah, so thank you so much. This is a brief of the work, the mobile app. It's available for download, and of course, thanks to the different funders who have supported us to make this happen. Thank you so much. Looking forward to the interactions.
Thank you very much, Prof, for that very interesting presentation, and really responding to a big challenge that a lot of African cities have with regards to air pollution. And very interesting that you made use of what you already had, in this instance being the motorbikes, and installing the air pollution monitors on the motorbikes. That's very innovative. And also, this also demonstrates how it's so important to bring together research and policy. So from the information and the data that you're able to collect, it then assisted the city with making sure that it guides their policy or decision-making processes that are evidence-based, and ensuring that they're then responsive to the needs of the citizens and the city as a whole. So thank you very much once again, Prof. So we're now going to have another live poll, which will enable you to once again participate actively. And the question that we'd like to ask you to please respond to, now having heard the different projects and programs that are being implemented, is just to let us know which SDGs does your work contribute most directly to achieving. And please limit your selection to 3 of these questions. So this is a multiple choice question, and you have all the SDGs listed. So if you can just select which one of the SDGs your work particularly contributes to, so that we can see from the participants the type of, or the line of work that you're in, and which SDGs you're contributing to. So at the moment we have SDG 6, so clean water and sanitation in the lead. And well, goal 11, sustainable cities and communities, which obviously links very well with today's theme of voices of African cities. So SDG 11, 13 as well, coming out very strongly, so climate action. And we have just a few more seconds for you to just share with everyone on the webinar in terms of your work and which SDGs you contribute to. Okay, so it's certainly SDG 11, so sustainable cities and communities. Thank you very much for participating in the poll. We will now then move on to our next speaker. And her name is Professor Stephanie Burton, and she is based at Future Africa, which is at the University of Pretoria in South Africa. And she is also the chairperson of the Future Earth Regional Office for Southern Africa Steering Committee, so FEROSA. And we're very excited that FEROSA is being launched today, and Professor Burton, who is the chairperson of the steering committee, will be giving us this presentation. And FEROSA is a structure that IFI Africa also sits on. So it's it's a great honor for us to have FEROSA being launched during this webinar. So over to you, Professor Burton.
Thank you. Thank you. And if I could have the first slide, please. The next one. Next slide. Thank you. I am here to just introduce FEROSA, and I'm going to do that by first of all talking very briefly about Future Earth, which is our parent organization. So Future Earth is an international organization, and the Future Earth Regional Office is a part of that. So let me talk about that. Next slide, please. So Future Earth, many of you may know, is an international organization. It focuses really on supporting transformations towards sustainability, and it seeks to build knowledge and find ways where we can accelerate sustainable development, working with scientists and many other organizations around the world. Let me just say about these slides that there's much more content in them than I'm going to read, but you will receive the slides and therefore all of the information that is in them. We could have the next slide, please. The objectives then of Future Earth are, as I say, focused very much on global sustainable development and a number of projects and programs which support that. I'm going to speak briefly about global research projects and knowledge action networks. All of these are international network organizations, and the regional and national entities within Future Earth, are one of the mechanisms whereby we can represent our regions and participate in all of the Future Earth objectives. Next slide, please. So this diagram, again, this is produced and supplied to us, and we are using it by courtesy of the Future Earth Global Organization. Sandrine Payard in particular has given us options of using some of her slides. So this is one of hers. This shows you on the left-hand side that the global research projects and the knowledge action networks are a key part of what Future Earth does as a strategy. And the whole idea is that the work that is done is cross-cutting and builds a field of knowledge and a big network of partners and organizations. Next slide, please. This slide shows you, and I won't dwell on this at all, this slide shows you some of the projects which Future Earth supports as global research projects. They are all available. The Future Earth network is enormous in these projects, and you can see from the Future Earth website, if you go there, much more detail about them. Next slide, please. The knowledge action networks are perhaps a little closer to what we've been talking about today. These are the particular focus areas of Future Earth, and as you can see on the right-hand side in the middle, sustainable consumption and production, water, energy, food nexus, and so on. These all speak very directly to the Sustainable Development Goals. And in each of these, there is a global network of research which is being conducted by the Future Earth participants. Next slide, please. I think you went two ahead, yes. So the cross-cutting research initiatives are also a part of the Future Earth program. They are known as the Pathways to Sustainability, and they focus particularly on the so-called green SDGs, which you can see on the left-hand side there. And the purpose of those is really to bring out and mobilize knowledge which will help to take those research agendas forward. They are very important pathways because they will allow not only a research agenda, but also political debates, information to policy, developing scenarios, and informing decision-making at the level of policy. Next slide, please. The pathways to sustainability programs within Future Earth really involve three different steps: national, international, and regional. And I use this slide because from 2020, there are a number of regional workshops which are taking place, and the regional centers, of which FEROSA is one, regional office, are instrumental in assisting with the global Future Earth programs to have workshops which are relevant in regions and which will allow us to work at different scales and to develop insights within our own regions to develop those pathways to sustainability. Next slide, please. So FEROSA then is a regional office for Future Earth in Southern Africa, and I have put the web address at the bottom of this slide. Our purpose is to address regional challenges, to facilitate research, to support networking, and to work for resource mobilization and develop our people and partners. We represent 16 countries in the Southern African region, and we're managed by a secretariat and a steering committee who are hosted by the National Research Foundation and supported by our National Department of Science and Innovation. Next slide, please. Our role is really as a conduit for communication, and as shown on the left-hand side there, coordination, enabling research, enabling communication, and building capacity. I've listed all of our different objectives in these slides. I'm not going to read them now, but they are there for you to look at, and we can certainly engage further with any questions. Next slide, please. So the research is really, as far as FEROSA is concerned, the research focuses on the same focus areas as Future Earth, which are listed in that box, but our role is to foster support for that through a transdisciplinary, interdisciplinary approach. And again, I've put our objectives in detail. I won't read them all. We see ourselves doing that though by networking and mobilizing human resources and partnerships and platforms, as well, of course, as looking for funding and assisting our partners with funding. Next slide, please. We see our people and partners as an absolute key to that. So in this slide, again, I've listed our objectives, but on the right-hand side, you see the list of countries where we are represented, 16 countries, the SADC countries, and we are open to interested parties from all areas who would like to participate with us. And our focus is really on establishing a strong network and a regional office which can support those networks to enhance the global agendas. Next slide, please. I'm going to skip this one because it's just organizational. And next one, please. And talk about one of our roles, which is a call for proposals that we have just recently issued, which is on pathways to sustainability in Africa. And we are focusing on supporting transdisciplinary networks to build our own capacity as a nation, and at least, sorry, as a region and within Africa. And we are about to host a workshop, a virtual capacity building workshop for early career researchers across Africa who are interested in joining to provide and develop proposals. And that workshop is about to take place. It's in fact next week that it's going to take place. And again, I have given you the websites for those, and you can find more information there. The pathway, next slide, please. The pathways to sustainability is part of a global networking development, and this is supported by the Belmont Forum. And here is again the full information that can also be found on the internet, and we'll be happy to provide more about it. But the Belmont Forum is supporting all of the pathways to sustainability programs. Next slide, please. So I have mentioned the Early Career Researchers Workshop. This is the detail on it. And again, I'm not going to read it all, but it is organized by the Future Earth office in the Ferosa office. And it's in collaboration with the Belmont Forum. Next slide, please. Finally, I just want to say there is also an international conference which was scheduled for this year, Sustainability Research and Innovation. It was due to be held in Australia in collaboration with Future Earth, Ferosa and the Belmont Forum again. But of course we have had to change that. So it is now planned for 2021. I have written across this, watch this space, you will see more about it. And some of it will be virtual and some of it will be hosted by Ferosa. Next slide, please. My last slide is this one, which just is to highlight that there are a number of SDG related activities in our own city, Pretoria, which is the capital city of South Africa, has a very large number of national government departments and national science centers. And where I am sitting at the moment is shown at the bottom left-hand side of the slide, Future Africa, which is an institute of the University of Pretoria and intended to be a hub for the African research community. And on the right-hand side, I've given you a little bit of information about the South African Sustainable Development Goal Hub, which is also hosted by our university, University of Pretoria, but serves as an implementation arm for the national government in terms of development of policy and provision of information about the SDGs. Those were my last information slides. Just if you could just turn to the last slide, you will see a photograph of the city of Pretoria, taken probably in about October when the jacaranda trees are flowering. But that's just a view of our city. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Burton, for your presentation. And it's very exciting that there is now a Future Earth Southern Africa office. So the region does really have a lot to look forward to. And as you invited everyone, that we're really wanting to build the network. So over the next coming weeks, months, and certainly years, we would want as many people involved as possible in order to build this network. So thank you very much for that, and absolutely for sharing the opportunities. I think this is something that people are constantly looking forward to. So we encourage everyone to apply so that we receive quality applications. With that said, we're now going to move on to the last segment of questions and discussions. And as mentioned earlier, the chats have been very, very active. The panelists have been responding and the participants sending a lot of questions. So that has been really been interactive. So thank you very much for that. So there are questions for our three speakers. And I'm going to start with the questions for you, Rina. If you can just note the question. And then I will move, so I'll read out the questions first, and then the panelists can then please respond to the questions. So I'm starting with a question for Rina. It is, how did you measure or monitor reduction of waste over the 1.5 years of the project? And then the second question is for Professor Baino Mugisha. And the question is related to the device, and there's been quite a big interest on that. So one of the questions is about how can we ensure that air pollution reduction is prioritized or well managed in COVID responses to build sustainable African cities that are healthy, clean, and fit for the future. And with that question, if you can also just squeeze in a response with regards to whether or not the devices can be installed onto other forms of transport. So for now, if we can have responses to those two questions, please, starting with you, Rina, immediately followed by you, Prof. Prof. Engineer, if you can just then respond immediately after Rina.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. During the 1.5 year, we haven't yet run monitoring of waste, because of most important for us for this starting a project is to ensure that there is a clear structure, governance structure, to manage the waste in the area. Therefore, we want first to implement what is the adapted governance, and who are the stakeholders involved, how they could be involved. And then later on during this scaling up phase, we are planning to monitor the impact of our project. One idea raised and discussed already with Dr. Engineer, is to join SDGs, two SDGs programs, like monitoring, to monitor the air quality, monitor the pollutions of the air in place where there is waste management. So that is one indicator that we could be used, but also we are thinking about diverse indicators to measure the impact of our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Rina. Over to you, Prof.
Thank you so much, Nancy, for those interesting questions. The first question was on how can cities prioritize air quality and how can it be managed? I have to say that the first step is obviously awareness. I think the cities, people who live in the cities and as well as the city management need to be aware that air pollution is a challenge, and there's a clear increasing evidence that air pollution affects human health. And I think working with the people who are in the medical field, in our case, we've been working with researchers in the Lung Institute who have done studies that actually shows that the lung health of people who live in cities is the lung functions tend to degrade compared to people who live outside the cities that are not heavily polluted. So I think the key aspect is bringing out the health evidence to show that this is having an impact on our health, and then emphasizing that cities have a role in all the projects they are implementing to pay attention to air pollution, and more especially on the vulnerable groups. We know that also pandemics like COVID-19 have made it even more apparent that air pollution makes certain conditions worse. We know that there is evidence that actually shows that places that have higher levels of pollution have had more impacts related to COVID-19. And I think that is coming out clearly, and therefore continuing the advocacy and awareness in the city municipalities to ensure that air pollution is taken as a priority is important, and pushing to create technical working groups in the cities, pushing for regulation and so on. On the question on whether the devices can be installed on other forms of transport, yes. The devices that we make are designed to be installed on mobile objects or static objects. So in the case of Kampala, we've been mostly prioritizing installing these on static locations like in schools, people's properties, and then on motorbike taxis, what we call border borders in Kampala. But the way they are designed is that we can have these installed on any moving object. And it's not a question of whether they can be installed on a moving object. Our primary objective is we want to collect data. We want to collect high resolution data. So if we have fewer resources, but we want to cover data collection across the city, how can we be innovative in available resources to have a wide coverage of data collection? And moving objects was a way for us to actually have a wider coverage and a higher resolution of data collection. Thank you for those questions.
Thank you very much, Prof. and Rina, for the responses. And Professor Burton, there is a question for you with regards to the role of science and research. So if you can please just share what is the role of researchers and research institutions in achieving the SDGs, particularly now that we are in the last decade, so the decade of action?
That's a very big question to answer in a few minutes. Researchers ask questions. They ask quite fundamental questions sometimes, and sometimes they ask questions which require data, or they look to see how they can solve challenges. Perhaps a good example is, for example, the taking a look across Africa at the impact of climate change and what that will mean for people who live in Africa going forward. That's a very complicated question, but it can't be answered unless you gather a lot of information, gather a lot of data, and then try to interpret it and try to provide answers to a number of sub-questions. So what do researchers do with all of this? They take those questions, they look to see what information can be made available, found, what information you need to generate, and then they put it together to seek to answer the questions which will then be assisting with addressing the SDGs. There are, of course, a lot of different questions and many different topics, but one of the most important things I think researchers do is to seek to network across the SDGs, knowing that none of the SDGs stands alone, and to try to find the interdisciplinary answers to questions which will allow us to link, for example, the food, energy, water network, and so on. So that's what researchers do. They provide information which can be the basis for decision making going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. So we're now going to move on to a live poll. So we're not able to take any further questions, but I think all the panelists have been able to respond to most of your questions. So we are nearing the end of the webinar. It's almost 2 hours, which has gone by very fast because of the active participation. So I'm now then going to request that we look at the last poll. So on your screen, you will see the question, which is, has the webinar been useful for you, and have you learned something new that you can apply in your work? And I'm sure everyone is seeing that it's moving very, very fast in terms of most people saying yes, the webinar has been very interesting and useful, and it's information that can be used in their work. So certainly majority of people are in agreement that this was indeed a useful webinar and it was informative. So thank you very much for voting and just expressing how you found the webinar. Okay, thanks. I think we can then close that poll. So as mentioned earlier, that as part of the roadmap to Rise Africa, there's a series of webinars that will be taking place over the next few months, which we would like to encourage you to please participate in. And the next one being the Future African Cities webinar, which is scheduled for the 8th of September. And if you look in your chat, you will see that a registration link has been shared. So you're in fact able to register immediately and make sure that this is already in your calendar for the 8th of September. And the webinar will be looking at challenging African urban visions. So using futures literacy to reimagine our cities. So very, very interesting topic indeed. So please do click on that link to be able to register for the webinar. And I would now like to say thank you very much for everyone for participating in our Voices of African Cities in the Localization of the SDGs webinar. And it really has been very, very active. You voted that it was very useful. So thank you very much for the feedback. And a special thanks to our panelists and our partners, the NRF. We could not have had the successful webinar without your support. So thank you very much, everyone, for your participation, and to the panelists for sharing your insights. And I will now hand over to the ICLEI Africa Regional Director, Ms. Kobe Brandt, to close the webinar for us. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nachi, also for wrapping up this very, very interesting 2-hour discussion. Clearly, we are only starting to scratch the surface here in terms of the potential and the needs of local governments to contribute to this next decade of action of SDGs. So from our side, I've certainly learned a lot. It was a real honor to have Ferosa launch today during this live webinar, and all the very best to Ferosa. You can count on ICLEI as a very strong partner. We've had a long history of working with Future Earth, and we're looking to intensify that collaboration here in the African context as well. So congratulations to you and all the very best. Also thanks again to NRF and our many, many partners, and especially those from cities, large and small, from across the continent and even further afield, that have joined us here today to make this discussion possible and insightful. So clearly we've seen that SDGs are deeply connected with each other. We are not only talking about SDG 11, but in fact SDG 11, like the water SDG, like the biodiversity SDG, they're so interconnected. The social SDGs, and there's a lot of work we still need to do. Our cities are shaped around sustainability principles. They should be shaped around those more, and they can be shaped around those more with people like us. We've heard from, again, from Africa, always something new. We've heard from the innovation coming from the engineers speaking about what's happening with Kampala and how they are doing research there. It's just amazing to see how innovative Africans are across the continent, and I'm continued to be amazed and inspired by what is happening in our cities. Sometimes there's such little resources, and we don't need all the answers. We don't need the high-tech technologies at all times to be able to make a sizable difference and get on with improving our lives and creating better urban futures for all. So I'd like to just say that Rise Africa is an online platform basically this year, also due to COVID, but next year we will meet in person, and then from there onwards the plan is to meet on Africa Day in person. Next year it will be combined with a virtual event, but already calendarize Africa Day, Rise Africa. That's where we're going to shake up our own lives, our own imaginations, and everybody else around us, so that we united can shape a better and urban future for all. And then just to also let you know that we've got a very exciting Local Climate Solutions for Africa online virtual webinar, actual whole congress coming up in October and November. Actually, it's from the early days of November. And this time we will focus on a much needed topic to be unpacked, and that is access to financing, not only for climate change, but for all SDGs as well. So please look out for notifications from ICLEI. And then please do visit our website, because I'm very happy to say that today we have, during these difficult times, we have just announced a number of very key and very exciting job openings with the ICLEI Africa office. Also calling on interns, young graduates to join us. They don't even have to have work experience to come and start their working careers here at ICLEI Africa, serving our cities towards sustainability. So please do visit our website. There's one on circular economy that's available, and a number of other exciting opportunities. Thank you to our partners. We've heard partnership a lot today, and that is so warm to hear, because in ICLEI we firmly believe that we need all hands on deck now, and we need them now. And if we do not get sustainability right in our cities and in our towns, if we do not deliver on the SDGs at the local level, there is no hope. There is definitely no hope for achieving it at the global level. So every city, every action that we take in an urban context does matter, and collectively, city by city, hand in hand, and in partnership with civil society, business, local governments, national governments, whole of society, whole of government approaches, we can, in fact, have a better world in 2030. So I thank you for joining us today, and I'm looking forward to seeing you again next week. Thank you very much. Stay safe and take care. Goodbye.